Hey, Danielle, yesterday, Donald Trump trying to backpedal from any association with Project 2025. On his social media platform, he said, quote, "I know nothing about Project 2025. I have no idea who's behind it. I disagree with some of the things they're saying, and some of the things they're saying are absolutely ridiculous and abysmal. Anything they do, I wish them luck, but I have nothing to do with them." But his super PAC, Donald Trump's super PAC, running ads promoting Project 2025, calling it Trump's Project 2025. The leader of the Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts, saying that Trump gets full credit for creating Project 2025 and will enact it if he wins. I mean, Danielle, shouldn't Democrats and the media be spending more time talking about their very real threats like Project 2025?
Yes, Katie, which is why I'm so appreciative of you. Because instead of us spending so much time focusing on Joe Biden's age, focusing on a debate, we're not focusing on the big picture here, which is that in 4 months' time, American democracy as we know it could be finished. Right? In 4 months' time, Donald Trump is talking about gutting the Department of Education, rolling back climate change initiatives, where right now, in parts of the country, are seeing 120-degree temperatures. But he wants to roll back climate change and policies. So we need to be focusing on what's important, which is that this country is in danger if Republicans get a hold of the executive branch. Following the Supreme Court's ruling, Donald Trump will never leave, and we need to understand what that means.
Susan, you wrote a great piece, as always, for MSNBC Online about how important President Biden's exclusive interview with ABC's George Stephanopoulos was going to be. But I listened to it, I watched it, I read the transcript of it. It seemed to me, and again, this is with all respect to George, but it seemed to me like Stephanopoulos was pushing one issue only, one issue, whether Biden is okay cognitively to be president. I mean, Susan, I don't think that should have been the point of the interview. I'll concede that maybe some questions should have been posed to President Biden, but noting Trump declined to sit for a one-on-one with George Stephanopoulos, why such a focus on that? Why such a focus on that issue?
Well, I understand your points and Danielle's points about the media and how they should be focusing on Donald Trump. But this is the way it has always been when it came to covering Donald Trump. The lies persist. And the debate performance, it was not a singular 90 minutes that had America really concerned about President Biden's health. It was a confirmation of the concern that people have had through the last several years, especially the last year. We see it in the polling. We've seen it in the stories. The whole purpose and the reason why Biden agreed to do this interview was to put people to rest on that singular issue on the debate. It wasn't a wide-ranging debate of just kind of how things are going. President Biden has refused to do those types of debates, most famously the Super Bowl interview. I shouldn't say debates before, but interviews. And this was the whole purpose, was to address those concerns, which have been raised at the highest level in our government. And, we have a lot of people off the record who works with the president. This is a legitimate concern. Biden did nothing to help himself with that interview. As a matter of fact, I think it's worse off. I think we're going to keep hearing the talk about it. And I would love nothing than to talk about 2025 and what a danger it is and a threat to our democracy and how bad Donald Trump is. But he's been bad for years. And his numbers are still where they are. The country's divided. And we have to make sure, someone like me who's a Republican and for right-leaning independents, I don't have the luxury of liking who the Democratic candidate is. I wish I could. It doesn't matter if I do or I don't. I have to vote for that candidate because I have to prevent Donald Trump from being in office. So, you can hear from the Republicans, we have no say in what the Democrats do as far as choosing their candidate, but Joe Biden's not doing himself any favors, and the cries are going to continue to grow. You don't like the narrative, I get it, but it's not changing.
You know, Danielle, I want to come to you because, and I respect Susan always and Susan's opinion, but I have a couple of issues and I wanted to talk to you, Danielle, about one. I feel like this is just a hammer looking for a nail. This is just one huge exercise in confirmation bias that's happening here. And I also think that the risk that we hear from kind of Susan's point about Republicans not having a say and really not really caring what happens in terms of liking who the Democratic nominee is, it reflects the normalization on the Republican side of Trump's bad behavior. It reflects the normalization of criminal conduct by Donald Trump. And I've asked this question before, and I wonder why the Democrats aren't taking a page out of the GOP playbook and just circling the wagons around Joe Biden. They do it around somebody like Donald Trump, who isn't worthy of it and has never earned it, but they're not doing it for Joe Biden.
Because this is what Democrats consistently do, and I don't understand it either. You know, yes, Joe Biden had a bad debate. He had a bad moment. I get it. But when you look at the course of his record over the last 4 years and the kind of economy that he inherited, the COVID-19 crisis that he inherited, we have to remember that when Joe Biden came into office, over 500,000 Americans had died because Donald Trump couldn't be bothered to tell them to put a mask on and couldn't be bothered to tell them to take care of themselves and their neighbors. Instead, he further divided this country. But we don't have a conversation about that, right? We don't have a conversation about Joe Biden's jobs numbers and how he did not add to the deficit in the way that Donald Trump did and put us nearly into a recession, right? We don't have that conversation either. And this is the same thing that the media did with Hillary Clinton when she had the flu. It was all eyes on Hillary Clinton. She's unfit. She's unwell. This is what we did back in 2016. Donald Trump is an existential threat to this country and our democracy. He is telling us out loud every single day what he plans to do. Project 2025 is not a hypothetical. It is a blueprint on how to reimagine this country through the lens of white nationalists, right? And so instead of circling the wagons and protecting our democracy and our president and end this ticket, the media wants to focus on whether or not Joe Biden can stand up for 90 minutes. I would like to focus on the fact that Donald Trump, every time he opens up his mouth, is using white supremacist talking points and already has the Supreme Court and hundreds of federal seats on lock. When he gets into the executive seat, all bets are off. And that is what the American people need to be paying attention to. What kind of country do you want? Right? Because I guarantee you that the people that are surrounding Biden right now are not on their way to jail or indicted in the way that Donald Trump's entire team has been.
You speak the truth. I'm sorry I'm out of time, Susan. I want to invite both of you to come back so we can continue this conversation.
Just one thing. You know, I agree with everything that Danielle said. I just wish that the Democrats would stop talking about it. Nancy Pelosi saying, is this a condition or was it an episode? Leads the media to follow. Sorry.
Well, listen, and let me be clear, and I'm probably making a lot of people angry right now telling me I need to wrap, but here's the deal. Because we talk about it, and I want to be clear, I'm talking about it on my show because I think it's an important thing to acknowledge why it's a disservice. But I agree with you, Danielle and Susan Del Percio, that we need to move on from it and focus on the critical issues like Project 2025. And the last thing I'm going to do is this. President Biden said in the interview last night, it's about the character of the president. The character of the president is going to determine whether or not this Constitution is employed the right way. And if you believe in that, that's not Donald Trump. Thanks to both of you for being here. I appreciate it.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn, MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.